The Nardi Silver Ray is a one-of-a-kind car that brings together Italian design and American power in a way that's truly special. Created in 1960, this unique vehicle stands out even among the rarest cars ever made. Giovanni Michelotti designed the Silver Ray, and it was built by Carrozzeria Vignale, a well-known Italian company that made custom car bodies. An American named James Simpson asked for this car to be made just for him. The Silver Ray's design was really different from other cars at the time. It had a low, sleek body made entirely of aluminum to keep it light. The front had a big grille with headlights on either side, and the back had large fins like American cars of that era. These fins weren't just for looks. They helped the car stay stable when going fast. Inside, the Silver Ray was fancy. It had leather seats and a dashboard made of shiny wood. It even had a radio and heater, which weren't common in all cars back then. The steering wheel was a special Nardi design, and under the hood, the Silver Ray had a powerful engine. It used a 5.7-liter Plymouth Golden Commando V8 that could make about 350 horsepower. This was an unusual choice for an Italian car, as they usually had smaller engines. But this big American engine gave the Silver Ray lots of power and speed. The car could go up to about 140 miles per hour, which was really fast for its time. It had a manual transmission, so the driver could control all that power. The Silver Ray also sat low to the ground, which helped it handle well at high speeds. The Silver Ray had an interesting suspension system. The front used modified coil springs, while the back had a setup more common in American cars. This mix helped balance comfort and performance. The brakes were drum brakes, but they were bigger than usual for better stopping power. This looked aggressive and helped the engine perform better. After it was built, the Nardi Silver Ray was sent to the United States and shown at car shows. It was meant to show off Italian design mixed with American power. But even though it was so unique, they only ever made one Silver Ray. For many years, no one knew where the Silver Ray had gone. Some people thought it might have been lost or destroyed. But in the early 2010, someone found it in a barn in the United States. The car was in bad shape after sitting untouched for so long, but all its original parts were still there. Car experts carefully fixed up the Silver Ray to make it look like new again. This was hard because many of its parts were custom made and not easy to find, but they managed to do it, and now the car looks just like it did when it was first built. Today, the Nardi Silver Ray is seen as a very important car from the 1960s. It shows how Italian and American car styles could come together at a time when they were usually very different. Now, a private collector owns the Silver Ray, and sometimes it's shown at car events around the world. The Silver Ray still inspires car designers and fans today. Its mix of Italian style and American muscle power makes it a fascinating example of car design. The story of how it disappeared and was found again adds to its mystery, making it a popular topic among car collectors and historians. The Anadol A1 was Turkey's first mass-produced car, marking a big moment in the country's car history. It all started in the 1960s when Turkey wanted to make its own cars instead of buying them from other countries. The Automotive Company, a team-up between Turkey's Koch Group and America's Ford, came up with the idea. Vehbi Koch, who founded the Koch Group, and Bernard Nahum, a big name in Turkey's car world, were the main people behind this plan. They wanted to make a car that regular Turkish people could buy, and that would help grow the country's economy by making it in Turkey. Koch and Nahum went foreign to see how they made cars with fiberglass bodies. They liked that fiberglass was light and didn't rust, but they thought the way it was made was too basic. This trip led them to Reliant, a British company that knew a lot about making small cars with fiberglass. Reliant was just right for what they needed because they knew how to make light cars, including ones with 3 wheels and small family cars. These were perfect for what Turkey wanted. After talking with Reliant, they agreed to work with Automotive to make a car that was cheap, reliable, and easy to build using fiberglass. They asked Tom Caron from Ogle Design, a British company known for designing vehicles, to create the car. They called the first version FW5, and it had a fiberglass body on a steel frame. Using fiberglass was a big deal because not many car makers were using it for regular cars back then. But it was great because it was light and didn't rust, which was good for Turkey. They finished the FW5 in 1965 and sent it to Turkey for testing. The Turkish officials liked how well it worked and how long it lasted. On December 19, 1966, they started making the Anadol A1 in a new factory in Istanbul. The first ones had a 1.2-liter Ford Kent engine that made about 48 horsepower. This engine was already used in other cars like the Ford Anglia, and people knew it worked well. The Anadol A1 was simple and practical, just what Turkish people needed in the 1960s. It was a two-door coupe, made to be cheap and easy to build. The fiberglass body was special because it didn't rust and was light, which made the car use less fuel. The car was about 4 meters long, 1.6 meters wide, and had 2.4 meters between the front and back wheels. This made it good for driving in cities. At first, it had a 1.2-liter engine from Ford that made 48 horsepower. It used a 4-speed manual gearbox and was rear-wheel drive. The car could go up to about 81 miles per hour, which was fast enough for most Turkish drivers then. In 1968, they put in a bigger 1.3-liter engine that worked even better. The Anadol A1 had springs in the front that moved on their own and leaf springs in the back. This made the car comfortable, but also good at handling different roads in Turkey. It had drum brakes on all 4 wheels, which weren't as good as disc brakes, but were easier to fix. Inside, the car was simple, but worked well. The dashboard had basic things like a speedometer, fuel gauge, and temperature gauge. In 1969, they made the steering wheel more comfortable and changed the dashboard to make it better to drive. The seats were covered in vinyl, which was easy to clean. The outside of the Anadol A1 was simple too, with round headlights, a basic front grille, and not much shiny metal trim. They made it look this way to keep it cheap to make and to appeal to lots of people. Even though it was simple, it looked different from other cars in Turkey because of its fiberglass body. When the Anadol A1 came out in 1966, people were excited but also unsure. They were happy that Turkey had made its own car, which was a big step for the country. But some people weren't sure about the fiberglass body because they didn't know much about it. They wondered if it was as safe and strong as the steel bodies on most other cars. Even with these worries, the Anadol A1 became popular quickly. It cost 26,800 Turkish lira, about $2,980 then, which many middle-class families could afford. This made it possible for more people to own cars. People also liked that the engine and gearbox from Ford were reliable, which made them feel better about the new fiberglass body. In the first year, Otosan made 1,760 Anadol A1 models. As more people heard about how practical and reliable it was, more people wanted to buy it. By the early 1970s, they were making a lot more, and you could see Anadol A1 all over Turkish roads. They made more than 62,000 Anadol A1 models by 1975 when they stopped production, which showed it was a big success and really important for Turkey's new car industry. The Anadol A1 was also used in car races, especially rallies. It was the first Turkish car to be in organized rally events, starting with the 1968 Trakya Rally. Its light fiberglass body and strong Ford engine made it good for the tough conditions in rallies. Being in these races made more people know about the car and showed it wasn't just for families, but could also be used in sports. Drivers like Renk Kokube and Demir Buki became famous in Turkish motorsports by winning many local rally races with the Anadol A1. This success in races made people think even more that the Anadol A1 was reliable and could do well both on normal roads and in races. Over the years, they made changes to the Anadol A1 to keep it new and interesting for buyers. One big change was in 1968 when they replaced the original 1.2-liter Ford Kent engine with a more powerful 1.3-liter version. This made the car perform better and compete better with other cars like it, while still not using too much fuel. In 1969, Otosan changed the dashboard design and made the steering wheel more comfortable. These changes were to make the inside of the car more modern and easier to use, based on what people said they wanted. They also changed how the outside looked, replacing the round headlights with oval ones, and changing the bumpers to make the car look more modern. In 1971, they made a special version of the Anadol A1 for the Mediterranean Games in Izmir. This version was called the Anadol Akdeniz, It had bumpers that were part of the body, a different front grille, and rectangular headlights with white signal lights. The inside was nicer too, with new seats and better materials. People liked the Anadol A1, and from 1972 on, they used some of its design in the regular on Anadol A1. They also made a four-door version called the Anadol A2 in 1971. This was for families who needed more space than the two-door A1 could give. The A2 was like the A1 in many ways, but was changed to suit more types of buyers. The GSM Dart is a special car in South African history. It all started in the 1950s when Bob van Niekerk and Willie Meisner decided to make a sports car. They met while Bob was studying mechanical engineering, and they shared a dream of building a South African sports car. Making a car in South Africa back then wasn't easy. The country didn't have many car-making resources. Bob had worked on an old Austin 7 inches before, and Willie was working in England's car industry. They faced many problems, like finding the right material for the car's body. At first, they couldn't move forward because they couldn't work with metal easily in South Africa. But then Willie learned about fiberglass in England. He told Bob about it, and Bob went to England to learn more. They started using fiberglass, which was new for car making at the time. It was light, strong, and easier to shape than metal. Next, they needed to make the car look good. They asked Verster de Whitty, a designer in Coventry, England, for help. They made small models out of clay to get the design right. After trying different designs, they chose one that looked sleek and was good for racing. In 1957, they made their first fiberglass body and sold it for £75. This money helped them keep working on the project. By the end of that year, they had a working car that they tested a lot. It worked well, so they started making more. The first GSM Dart was made in 1958 in a small South African factory. It was a two-seat sports car that people liked because it looked good and drove well. One cool thing about the Dart was that it could use different engines. Most used the Ford Anglia 100E engine, but some had stronger engines like the Alfa Romeo SV. The Dart was also safer than many other cars at the time. It had crumple zones, which were areas that would squash in a crash to protect the people inside. This was a new idea when most car makers weren't thinking much about safety. Racing was a big part of the Dart's story. In 1958, Bob and Willie entered the car in the 9 Hours race in South Africa. They raced against famous brands like Porsche and Lotus. The Dart did really well and even led the race at one point. This showed everyone that the Dart was a serious racing car. The Dart kept doing well in races over the next few years. It often beat more famous cars. This made more people want to buy it. By the end of 1959, they had made 41 Darts, mostly for people who liked racing. The Dart became famous in South Africa as a sign of what the country could do. The car also became known in the United Kingdom. When they started making it there, they had to call it the GSM Delta because Chrysler was already using the name Dart. In England, the Delta kept racing and doing well. It surprised many people, including Colin Chapman, who started Lotus. He couldn't believe a simple car like the Delta could beat his Lotus 7s. Bob and Willie decided to make the car in the UK too, but it wasn't easy. At first, they thought they had found someone to help, but that person ended up in jail. Bob had to start all over again to find a new partner. Then Bob met John P. Scott. Scott was interested, but not sure about a car from South Africa. He said he would pay for one car if Bob could build it and race it at Brands Hatch in the 1000cc GT class. If it did well, Scott would think about putting in more money. Bob and his team had only 10 days to get the car ready. They worked very hard and finished just in time. The car won its race, which made Scott and his friends very happy. This win helped them start making more cars in the UK. In the UK, they had to compete with well-known brands like Lotus, MG, and Triumph. It was hard because these brands were already famous and had many loyal customers. Also, the UK's economy wasn't great for car makers at that time. Even with these problems, the GSM Delta found its place in the UK. It did well in races at places like Brands Hatch, Goodwood, and Silverstone. This helped more British sports car fans learn about it and like it.